Hey everyone, welcome to another chess video. Today we're going to look at the round 3 game in the Lindores Chess Stars tournament between Liren and Sergey Karjakin. Now I believe this tournament is a rapid time control, so it should make some very interesting chess, and I might go through some other games in this particular tournament very soon. Here Liren's white and Sergey Karjakin plays black, and white opens with d4 and black plays knight to f6, c4 and e6. Here white plays g3 and Karjakin plays bishop to b4 check, and we get into this Bogo Indian game. And here white now plays bishop d2, and this is where black now has to think about what to play. There are a number of options in this position, so black can opt to play queen to e7 here if they wish to protect the bishop, and this is a typically even game now, so knight f3, knight c6. White could continue knight c3, and black usually takes the knight, followed by bishop takes the bishop, and knight to e4. And now white just plays something like rook c1, and we get into this opening bishop g2 and d6. These are all typical moves, and after knight d8, d takes e6, knight takes e6. We're into an even game, and both players could fight for a victory here. Two other moves that are unusual. This is like a modern system. You could play c5, this is quite a modern idea, and after bishop takes b4, c takes b4. The idea is that the pawn's misplaced on b4, but it also is a thorn in white's side, because the knight can no longer go to c3. So white has to maneuver around that pawn, so it can be quite annoying. This is also echoed by another move that you can play, a5 here, protecting the bishop and gaining some space on the queen side. So white can play knight to f3, and black can play b6, bishop g2, bishop b7, castles, and again this is quite an even opening. Black just needs to be careful of knight g5 ideas sometimes. If the queen moves to c2, if the queen hypothetically moves to c2, there's a line where the knight can jump into g5 and threaten mate, and also threaten this bishop at the same time. So black does have to be a bit careful. In the game though, Karjakin actually played the move bishop to e7, so dropping the bishop back. Now you think, has black just wasted a tempo here? Well, the idea is that the bishop on d2 for white is now misplaced. Here white now plays bishop to g2, developing, and Karjakin plays d5, getting some space in the centre, knight to f3, and castles by black. Now you may be thinking, what happens if black now takes this pawn? It's a free pawn, right? Well, no, because queen a4 check, we'll just pick up the pawn and move later. So after castles, white castles, and black now plays knight bd7. Another move that could be played is c6, which is really solid, super solid in fact. And after queen c2, now play knight bd7, bishop f4 and b6. So this is a super solid structure for black. They might pop the bishop onto b7 or a6 at some point, maybe even play a5 and b5, but black does have a nice structure here and doesn't have many weaknesses. Karjakin actually played knight bd7, like I say, and queen to b3 from white, which looks like a very unusual move. I suppose it supports the c pawn, and also threatens to take on d5 at some point, perhaps. Black now plays knight to b6, so ganging up on the c pawn, and white now pushes it, attacking the knights, and Karjakin now plays knight to c4. Moving the knight back was probably a bad idea, so this is probably the best for black. And Ding now drops his queen back to c2, and black now plays b6. So the idea is to attack this c5 pawn. I was thinking what would happen if white now plays b4. That looks like a normal looking move. Well, in fact this actually is a terrible move due to a5. So if we protect that with a3, white's not actually losing material, but he's gaining a really terrible structure. After a takes b4, bishop takes b4, black can play b takes c5, and after d takes c5, just play c6. Black's got a great position, white's not doing so good. The bishop on b4 looks terrible. And after a move like knight bd2, takes, bishop a6, we see that black's got optimal development, and the moves will come easy. Queen c7 maybe, and rook b8, and maybe even e5 at some point, and white's struggling because the a3 pawn could become weak, the c5 pawn is weak, So yeah, you prefer black in this position. So for that reason, Ding actually played c6 here. That pawn acts as a bit of a thorn in Black's side here because he can't play bishop b7. But Karjakin works around it, he plays a5, and White finally moves his misplaced bishop to f4. So this is where Black gains their tempo back. Bishop a6 now from Karjakin, x-raying that f1 rook, and rook d1 from White. Karjakin plays h6 here, probably taking away any ideas of knight g5 in the future, and White now plays knight to e5. b3 was a move as well, attacking the knight, and Black's pretty much forced to play knight to a3 if he did that, and after knight takes, bishop takes, White could now play knight to e5, but queen e7 and maybe h4. I feel like White's gaining a bit of a grip on Black, but again it's really even, the bishop can always drop back to d6. White does have some control here. So b3 in this position was an idea, but instead Ding opted for knight to e5, so it's attacking the knight on c4. If Black now takes that knight, maybe d takes, and after knight h5, bishop e3, queen e8. Black's got an even position, and that's the only problem is with that knight, but it's protected by the queen at this point. But White could throw in g4 here, and we get into this crazy variation where Black can play f6, and g takes h5, f takes e5, where Black gains 2 pawns on the centre for incredible weaknesses to White's king. I'll show you more of this idea in a future variation because it comes up quite a lot in this game. Instead of taking on e5 though, Black decides to play queen to e8 first, and Ding now plays an interesting move, just plays a4. Knight takes c4 again is another option. If the bishop takes, rook c1. It's still an even game, but there's a trap here. If queen takes c6, White can just play b3 and wins a piece. I don't think Karjakin would have ever fallen for that, but it was an option. So Ding actually played a4, maybe stopping b5 ideas where Black could play rook b6 at some point, or try and isolate this c6 pawn. But now Karjakin decides to take on e5. g5 was also an option, very interesting one, because the bishop has to drop back. After knight takes e5, d takes e5, Black could play knight to g4. If bishop d4, then f6. Black's doing relatively fine now. After e takes f6, bishop takes, and knight takes. The game's really even, and I'd actually prefer Black because he's got the centre, and this c6 pawn could become very weak at some point. So for that reason, I'm surprised Karjakin didn't play g5 here. But he takes an e5, and after d takes e5, he moves a knight to g4, which is actually a fatal error in this position. Knight h5 is the move that the computer was advocating for, and it makes sense as well because the Black knight could take on f4 at some point. So if bishop e3, maybe f6, so the queen makes sense now on e8, it's protected the knight and also attacking the c6 pawn. But I'll come back to that variation I told you about. White can now play g4, and if f takes e5, g takes h5, and queen takes h5, Black's doing really well now. Even though they just sacrificed a piece, Black's got a really strong attack, and those pawns in the centre are really big monsters. So in this position, the bishop and the queen are attacking on e2, so f3 is pretty much forced here. If White now plays knight c6 to protect this pawn, just play d4, attacking both these pieces. So that's not an option. So f3 has to be played. And Black can play bishop to d6, threatening to play e4, because they're both attacking this pawn. So if knight c3 here, Black can just play e4, attacking on h2. And if f4 to block, Black can just calmly play a move like rook to f7. And White has to do all the defending here. It's not easy to pick a move. If h3, just rook a f8, and they're attacking this f4 pawn. If rook f1, Black can just calmly come into the position with queen h4. And if rook a d1, just queen g3 attacking the bishop. If the bishop retreats, rook f6, preparing rook g6 attacking on g2. And if king h1, just g5. So look at this, all of Black's pieces come into the attack really nicely, all for the expense of that knight. So perhaps knight h5 here was the only move that Karjakin could have played. I think he mistakenly thought knight g4 also leads to a similar attacking position, but after knight g4, h3. I think he actually missed, like g5 doesn't really work. g5 is an option here. I think his idea was like if the bishop moves, the knight takes e5, and if white captures on g4 and black captures, maybe he thought black was doing well, but after g takes f4 and f6, white's actually got a bit of an advantage. E takes f6, rook takes f6 and e3. If rook g6 here, let's say, just bishop f3, and white's doing fine. Looks a bit ropey, but it all holds together. So maybe Karjakin should have gone for this actually. It was best to know what happened in the game. Instead, Karjakin took on f2 with the knight, sacrificing it for a pawn. And after king takes f2, bishop c5. So it looks as though white's position is under threat. Those two bishops look really good. But there's no way for the queen or the rook for black to get into the game to follow up the attack. f6 is rather slow, as you'll see. So here it's check. Ding now plays bishop to e3. Black takes on e3 and king takes e3. So that was black's attack. There's no way to follow it up. So Karjakin follows it up with f6 though. It's just too slow, unfortunately for him. After e takes f6, rook takes f6, the king is cut off. White now just plays calmly, plays bishop to f3. So this stops the queen coming into h5 and also gives the king a retreating square to f2 back. Karjakin plays queen e7. Ding goes for the idea of playing king d2 here. Knight a3 was probably a better move, but you can see why Ding was running with the king, just to make sure that he can just run away with his free piece. Because if queen d6, king f2, this looks really risky. I would never play it as white personally, but this is a computer variation. So after rook a f8, knight b5, black's pretty much forced to take that knight off. And after e5, it looks a bit ropey for white, but rook a4 actually holds everything together nicely. If queen e6, white can now amazingly play rook f4, threatening bishop takes d5. If rook takes f4, g takes f4, rook takes, the king can go to g3, and amazingly everything holds nicely together. If d4, stop bishop takes d5, white can play bishop g4. After queen d6, e3, rook f7, white's actually doing better here. After rook a4, e4 could also be tried, but just rook takes e4, and after d takes e4, just rook takes d6, rook takes d6 and queen takes e4. So white's got a bishop and a queen for the two rooks, so it's an easy win at this level for those two players. Here though, Ding just runs with the king. He plays king to d2, Karjakin plays queen to d6, going to pick up that g3 pawn, so we would have two pawns for the knight. So king c1, and now queen takes g3. But that a4 move has come really in handy for white because he can play rook a3 now and develop his last piece. Karjakin plays rook a f8, getting his last piece into the attack, but it's just not good enough. Knight c3 is played, and I think black could resign here, to be honest. I know white's piece is a little uncoordinated, but I think black's next move just sums it up a bit. He plays king h8, which is quite defensive considering you're a piece down. Queen g5 could be played, but I guess king b1 and rook f4, and I don't see how black can follow up the attack, so it looks like it's game over now. So Karjakin plays king h8, knight b5 from white, and black's forced to take that knight off, otherwise the bishop's just useless. So he takes, Ding recaptures, and Karjakin plays queen h4. I was thinking what would happen if queen takes h3 to pick up another pawn, but bishop d5 is really strong. After queen g4, white can now just play bishop c4 and everything just holds nicely together. Queen h4 is played by Karjakin, and Ding just plays king b1 and everything's safe as houses now. Rook f4, white now plays rook e3 attacking the pawn. Karjakin defends it, but bishop g4. After rook c4, queen to d3, rook to b4 from Karjakin. Ding now just calmly takes his pawn on e6 and black resigns. So that was a really nice game from white, very simple actually, and I think Karjakin just missed that he didn't have a strong enough attack with this knight to g4 move. Instead, as I say, knight to h5 looked a lot stronger, and after white moves back, just play f6 and everything's opened up. I think the difference between knight g4 and knight h5 is this f6 move. So black's already played it, and after g4 the attack's already ready. After g takes h5, the queen's into the attack and the bishop's already into the attack, and so is the rook, and this bishop will be into the attack very soon. So compare that to knight g4 and h3 and knight takes f2. There's a vast difference between the two moves. It's all locked up here where the queen and rook are. But anyway, that was a very nice, interesting game, and I hope you enjoyed it. Please like and subscribe if you did enjoy this video. I'll do some more chess videos very soon. Thank you for watching.